From the time we'd start a project and then into the time we get the sample, I think to start a project, we're probably looking at, a mid to higher end bike, 18 months. We're often at the mercy of the worst lead time part, and that could be a spoke. You've got your assembler at the last minute when you're going to a product launch or a media launch, and they're telling you the bottom bracket cups aren't staying in the BB, and you're kind of hitting the panic button going, what do we do? How do we address this? We can't let this be out there. We've had to cancel a major launch because of that. Those are things that you just kind of get used to kind of fighting in the trenches and addressing and figuring out. But I think it's gotten better for us, especially having our team more dialed in, right on the line in a lot of cases. They're sitting there watching the bikes go into the box. That's a key step to know what's going to end up being opened when the box is opened later. Yeah, I think today we're here to talk about a bike that's still kind of behind the scene, something we're working on. It's a trail bike. The goal is for you guys to get kind of a first look at it and kind of behind the scene of how we're developing that bike, and just maybe an overview of all our bikes in development and some of the process steps that we go through to get where we're at with our bike line.
So prior to starting any of this, the product manager will have laid out basically a table of the specifications. So he's going to have a pretty good idea of what tires he wants his bikes to be able to fit, what tires are going to come on it, and same thing with shocks and forks and even headsets. And bottom brackets will all be specified out beforehand. So a lot of that stuff is defined, which helps a lot when you're looking at these 2D clearances. And also critical for that, because if your shock spec changes, then your whole bike design can change.
We're at the kind of mercy of our component vendors too. If they're moving ahead with something like metric or bigger tires, or Eagle, where all of a sudden the XC guys are running 38 front chain rings. Those are small details you need to know well ahead, because if you're designing your bike around the last generation of one by, you've missed the window on your next generation bike. When people are starting to talk about 2.6 tires, we'd probably been running them for a year and a half, and that was a new tire that hadn't even hit the market yet, or a new tire size. So our process, once we've kind of completed the overall feeling of the bike and the layout with the product managers who decided where this bike's going to sit and in what space, we pretty much immediately start in 2D. First step is draw the wheels, lay out basic geometry. So we're looking for reaches, top tube lengths, bottom bracket drops, all the critical stuff. From there we start to look at basic suspension pivot points. So what's our overall architecture? Most of our bikes right now are horse links, so you're going to get a layout somewhat similar to this. And then once we've determined the kinematics we're looking for, we're going to start sketching in a lot of the other parts of the bike, so looking at things like seat tube, and also start to look at some of these tire clearances, in particular link arm to seat tube, and also shock to seat tube. You basically just kind of look at where your tightest tolerances are going to be and how you can move your parts around those. So once we've looked at our tightest clearances, again, generally basically water bottles and seat posts, then we can start to sketch out the front triangle. And so here we're looking for a few things. A little bit less on clearances at this point, because we hope that we're going to sketch most of the critical ones out by this point. So with a carbon bike like this, it's a little bit simpler. We basically just draw the shape we want around the outside of the bike. So we'll start with a few sketches. You can kind of see something like this, where we'll print out you'll print out your wheels and suspension pickup points, and then from there you can kind of sketch around and get a few different concepts for the look you want, and then come back to your 2D space and use those shapes and forms that you want to translate into your model. So the more interesting and exciting part of the design process is when we're able to do our 3D prints. So we do these for all carbon projects and certain aluminum projects where we're particularly worried about clearances. This bike is a good example with the inverted shock, which can cause some lever problems. So we get the whole bikes RP'd. We'll often build them up using a mix of both the plastic and actual production parts. So in this case, a lot of the hardware is shared, so we're able to use that. And we'll bring these in and build them up as complete bikes. This one's been stripped down since then, but we can check things like making sure we've got proper shock actuation clearances up here, that we're happy with all like the wheel installation clearances. And then also cable routing is a huge part. So actually the cable routing has changed since we got these bikes, because we weren't totally happy with it. But we'll be able to route like a full set of cables, make sure everything's where we want them. Yeah, so from there we'll start to, once it's sent off for tooling, the kind of next thing the engineering group's going to see is our first production looking samples. So we'll get basically a raw welded frame or raw carbon front triangle, whatever it is, and we'll do exactly the same process as we would on the RPs. So again, we're checking things like clearances,
making sure that the final product meets all of our needs, and then also doing a bit more of an initial manufacturing inspection too, so making sure that all the fixturing is adequate and the final tolerance is what we're looking for. And at this point we'll have quite a bit of back and forth with our vendors, especially with welded assemblies. You'll get a lot of shifting during welding, so you're typically tweaking your fixtures pretty significantly. Also gives us a chance to kind of build up a few finalized bikes, and we can at least bounce on these ones. So immediately after this, we're going to get our first ride samples, which we've actually just received. So let's go take a look at them.
I mean, I can set it up as best to my ability as kind of like where I would ride it. It's kind of where I take it to. And then these guys will all fine tune it, you know, getting the cockpit set up the way they want it, you know, fine tuning their suspension. So he should probably be running about 28 to 32, somewhere in there. Well, I would think, I mean, if it's fluid, I mean, you want it to be a bit more pedally, right? A bit more cross country, So let's get you set up for, say, 32-ish.
Yeah,
at least.
Put like another 5 PSI and we can always take a bit out.
Well, I'm going to be testing the fit of the bike on, for my size, a large, and seeing how the suspension feels, and then going back to Jeff and telling him what I'm liking, what I'm not liking. And on my side, on the product management side, I'm testing parts out. We try to spec out our bikes, or spec out our prototype bikes, our rideable prototype bikes with parts we would spec. First run down, let's give it a try.
Yeehaw. Oh yeah, you're looking dirty. No like unnecessary arm fatigue or anything?
No, it was a solid, like...
Because we could try putting another volume spacer on the floor. That's how we set the 140s up, but...
Yeah, I don't feel like I need to.
Doesn't look like it. You still
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not diving, it's not, you know, just
yeah,
it feels...
the biggest thing is it feels like you can put weight on it.
It feels stable front and back.
Sweet.
You know, why do we have a 120 bike? Why a 140? And even why a 160? You know, are we crowding the category too much? I would have to say no, because I think different people ride differently. They ride in different places, different styles of riders. You know, I'll tell people to buy this trail bike if they want to bridge that gap more towards XC into all mountain. A sight's not that bike. So, you know, we keep segmenting categories, but I think it's a necessary thing as components get better, people get smarter to geometry and understanding the way the bikes ride. You know, weight can be a factor. Personally, within the department, I think we feel a need for this trail bike and improvements to our past designs. And I think it's a 100% relevant category, and it's not, you know, an overlap there. So it's a tough one, but it's kind of our take on it.
Hit here to see more videos. Hit here to subscribe. Testing's been great so far, but I'm leaving a little bit deflated. And we're clear.